and really getting some nice intellectual collisions, that, like Ed likes to say. So we have a couple of things happening at lunch. First is we're going to have some lightning talks by the student poster competition winners from last night. So I think we had many of you in the building last night at the Syracuse Center of Excellence headquarters just down the road, where we had a student poster competition. So this is students from 4 different universities, so from Syracuse, SUNY ESF, Clarkson, and Rochester Institute of Technology all came together to present their student research. We had categories for undergraduate, master's, and PhD, and we had 3 winners for each category. There were about 30 posters that were entered. If you missed the competition, we have abstract books sitting outside, which has abstracts of all of the student posters, so you can figure out what you missed and maybe learn something more or contact the student if you're interested. And also, thanks to our judges, we had about 10 judges last night. They're listed on the back of your program. So thanks to them. And also thanks to our sponsor, the New York Indoor Environmental Quality Center. They sponsored that student poster competition and the prizes for that. So what we are going to be doing now, lightning talks. So I've asked all the students who won last night to come up and give 2 minutes about their poster. And they were supposed to be prepared. They were told in their email last week that this was happening, but I think a lot of them came up with their 2 minutes last night. So you're going to see some nice creativity for these students. 6 of them are going to be presenting. Not all 9 could make it. The big green button? Okay, so 3rd place for the undergraduate posters, the winner was Hebron Yam from Clarkson University. He talked about the optimization of ducted wind turbines. He went back to Clarkson last night, so he is not going to be joining us. So next slide. 2nd place, we have Mohammed Hani Suleiman, Di Wang, Mahmoud Hamwi, and Kwan Yang. So Mohammed and Kwan are here to present about using renewable energy to regulate voltage. And I will be timing them for 2 minutes.
Hi everyone, I'm Mohammed Hani.
Hi, I'm Kwan, yeah.
So basically our poster was about the voltage regulation. We used like the renewable energy sources. We used the wind and solar energy to regulate the voltage. We know like in our daily life, that we have to regulate the voltage, especially in the commercial areas and in the suburbs where the people they live. We basically did our calculation based on the voltage regulation, and we suggest 2 ways. We use the stator compensator, and we use the wind and wind energy and the solar system energy, and we suggest that if we use the wind and solar energy, we're gonna make profits, and we're gonna make we're gonna be able to make in 4 years we're gonna make more. We're doing more profits and voltage. You can go ahead and explain more.
Yes. So the voltage regulation, that we have the range of the voltage regulation. We want the minimum voltage regulation to be the 0.95, which we can use our voltage and power more efficiency. And we know that we can have that plan to earn some profits. It's we have a calculation 3.8 years. We can get the payback from that plan. Yeah.
Great, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you to them. So next slide, 1st place winner in the undergraduate posters was Chelsea Willer from Syracuse University. Her poster was on visual and non-visual effects of daylighting.
Hi, so my poster focused on the idea of wellness in architecture and how we can start designing to promote that. Primarily at the schematic design stage. So it tries to associate itself with well-building standards, but at a precursor so that we have a framework to follow. This framework is broken down into 9 elements of well-being. These were determined by the physical, social, and mental health categories. And then they were subcategorized into groupings of 3 interrelated elements. For instance, daylighting, vegetation, and ventilation, that all kind of work together to achieve some sort of health and well-being within a space. These can be used by demographic research of a specific area, looking at the program required and then selecting, say, 3 elements that you think are most important. These elements that you select can then be used to determine different spatial configurations of the building based on the elements from a very human-centric point of view. I looked more specifically at daylighting, which has both visual and non-visual effects on your health and well-being. So this is at a biological level and can be influenced by the angle of the sun and how it relates to your building. So learning how to incorporate that into the building through orientation, form, programming can then be used as kind of a guidebook during the early stages of design to influence how you might think about it from a human point of view. Thank you.
Next, back to those slides. So 3rd place for the master's category, we have Suyash Arvind Sahasrabhojanee is going to be presenting for his group on power consumption, smoothing, and voltage regulation in Adamsville, Florida.
Hello everyone. So my topic was power consumption smoothing and voltage regulation with renewable energy. So it was basically controlling the amount of energy that was generated, the amount of conventional energy that was generated in a grid with the help of renewable energy, integration of renewable energy. So what we did was we integrated solar, wind and tidal energy into the already existing grid and found out the results, and based on the results we plotted some curves. So basically first, without any tidal, wind and solar energy, we plotted we calculated the amount of energy that was to be supplied by the conventional generator, and then after that we integrated wind and solar energy with it, and then again plotted the curves, and after it wind, solar and tidal, all 3 were used, and then the curves were plotted. So the curves were like when only conventional energy source was used, the curve varied a lot. This means that around 2 or 3 generators might be needed by the utility service to provide the required amount of energy. Then when the wind and the solar was integrated, then the amount of energy that was provided by the generator reduced pretty much. And after the tidal was generated, the amount of energy which was provided by the generator smoothened out for the most of the period of the time of the day. And that's what we achieved. And also the voltage, as the amount of energy provided by the generator didn't have to vary much, even the voltage regulation that was required, the voltage regulation that we got also was reduced from, also was increased from 0.8 to 0.98, which is a very remarkable number. As well as we found out the payback periods of the systems, and we found that if we integrate solar and wind to the existing system, the payback period is around two years, which is pretty small, and the cost that we get back after 2 years can again be used to rebuild another system, and thus this can be a chain effect, and we can continue doing it by just installing one and then using the money which we get from one and again doing it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then the next slide for 2nd place in the master's category, we have Geoff Millard from Syracuse University talking about the Mercury cycle in the watershed.
Thank you. So this was a large cooperative project between Syracuse University, SUNY ESF, Cornell, and the United States Geological Survey, and we were funded by NYSERDA. So thanks for all of that. My small piece of this project is looking at the mercury cycling in this watershed in response to decreases in sulfate deposition as well as a liming application. And the story sort of begins with acidic deposition back in the 60s and 70s, and then with the Clean Air Act and its amendment, we've seen huge decreases in sulfate deposition, which is allowing a lot of these ecosystems in the Adirondacks as well as Northern Europe to begin to go through a natural recovery, which is a really good thing. Except on the other side of that natural recovery, we're seeing increases in water coloration, which is mostly dissolved organic carbon. And that dissolved organic carbon has very strong positive correlations with total mercury concentrations. So as we go through this recovery that's projected to take decades to a century, what we're going to see in a lot of these systems is increases in dissolved organic carbon, and bringing with that increases in total mercury concentrations, which is a pretty potent neurotoxin that nobody really wants to eat. What we have done is we're attempting to accelerate this recovery process with a liming application. So we dropped lime on a chronically acidic watershed and then monitored what happened with the mercury in the DOC for the next year. And what we have found is that in the first water year, we do see a huge increase in organic carbon as well as total mercury coming out into the system, but it's not declining back to pre-lime levels. So that's not a good thing. But on the bright side, the organic mercury, the methyl mercury, which is the species that mostly bioaccumulates and biomagnifies through food webs, does have a big flush that comes through in the first 5 to 6 months, but then after that, those concentrations have dropped so that they are at or below pre-treatment levels. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Great presentation. And then for first place in the master's category, you have Mehmet Yildirim from Syracuse University talking about bypass for enclosed aisle data centers, which is also funded by NYSERDA.
Yes. Hi. Yes, our project is funded by NYSERDA too. In United States, data centers consume 2% of the total electric usage, and 34% of this is used by cooling infrastructure, and we are trying to reduce this. Enclosed aisle separates hot and cold air and prevent mixing, and this results the air from the racks passes through the CRAH unit, and this resulted CRAH fan power. This resulted CRAH fan power usage. I'm sorry. What we propose is we can supply some fraction of the air with bypass fans and reduce the CRAH fan power usage. We have two models. One is flow network model, and the other is thermodynamic model. We use these models to simulate full-scale data centers, and our preliminary results show that we can save 40% of the cooling infrastructure power used, and we are still working on our models, improving our models, and we will have more accurate results soon. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mehmet. Going on to the PhD category, third place, we had Lourdes Gutierrez from Rochester Institute of Technology, where she talked about campus-scale transaction-based controls by open-source software platform, where she's using some software developed by the Department of Energy and applying that to campus buildings to optimize their energy usage. She was not presenting. She had a flat tire in Rochester, so she couldn't make it back today. Next one, we had the second place was Malloy Squier from Syracuse University on the analysis of thermal performance on an extensive green roof in Syracuse. She looked at the green roof on the on-center, and she was doing the hydrology and thermal performance of that roof in several seasons. She was not able to make it today. So the next slide, we have our last presenter for the students. First place in the PhD poster was Ryan Milcarek from Syracuse University, where he talked about the flame-assisted fuel cell furnace, combined heating, and micropower.
Thank you, Chetna. My project that we've been working on for a little while now is partly funded by the Department of Energy in the past and now currently funded by NYSERDA, so thank you for our support. We're also, our project, the main idea is kind of overcoming some of the issues that we have with fuel cells. Obviously, not too many of you probably have a fuel cell car or a fuel cell power generation system in your house, but we'd like to change that. And two of the main obstacles that we have are costs and materials. Well, we would like to kind of look at that cost aspect a little bit. One of the issues, and sometimes we think it's just the fuel cell materials that cost a lot, and they do. Typically, maybe 30 to 40% of a typical system comes into the stack cost. That's the actual fuel cell materials. But a lot of it, the bulk, is actually the rest of the system. It's the thermal management, and it's the actual reforming system if you're going to use natural gas or propane, if you're going to use a hydrocarbon that's readily available instead of the hydrogen that we unfortunately don't quite have yet. So our project integrates this thermal management system with a reforming system. We combine them together by using combustion. Combustion is a reforming process. We can get hydrogen and carbon monoxide out of it, and by running that directly through a fuel cell, we can actually generate power. Now imagine, instead of having your typical furnace that you have at your house, it's running. For most of us, mine's been running for about a month now almost. We're getting into that season. It's very important for us. Imagine if that furnace, every time it ran, was also generating electricity. That is what we're looking for. A fuel cell system working with a traditional combustion systems like a furnace, hot water heater, or a boiler that can actually generate power and heat for a home, a micro combined heat and power system. Or we actually call it, because it's only a small part of the power we're actually generating, we're saying a combined heating and micro power system. So that's my project, and if you would like to learn more, we're going to have a presentation later at about 2:45 session. So.
Thanks very much, Ryan. Yeah, Ryan will be talking actually at the next, or at the session at 2:45. So you'll get to hear more about his research. Thank you to all of the students that presented at the posters, and then today, where they kind of were thrown into it and they were prepared to present their posters, and now they're presenting without visuals. So I can understand the challenge. So you guys did a great job. Thank you again.